Hello and welcome back to the Durgama Peninsula. This is week 2 of Durgama Takeover, and today we'll be playing Supplies versus O-12. This is my list for the game, and it would basically be drawing on many of the same themes and lessons that I've learned playing Haqqislam through the campaign to date, with the notable exception that I'm basically just shoehorning a Shakoosh in there. I don't think a Shakoosh is necessarily a fantastic fit for supplies, although it does have a Whip 14 specialist in it. But I had painted up my proxy Shakoosh and I wanted to use it, and that's basically as far as it went. Otherwise, we can see the Asawira Doctor plus Mukhtar Multi-Spectral Visor Red Fury duo that has been doing very well in game so far, which is a fantastic fit for this mission, and then just a variety of other stuff. To fit the Shakoosh, we are limping by with a much reduced hacking presence, relying on a Ghulam hacker in Group 2 if I need Group 2 hacking orders, and a Fidei and the usual bikers. This is my opponent's O-12 list, and I like a lot of what is going on, although it is a bit of a grab bag of pieces. There are elements in there that are just kind of being thrown in, and that's by design. My opponent here is learning O-12. You'll see some freshly painted models or in-progress models in the pictures here, and so he's putting basically one of everything almost into lists, with the exception of his Flash Pulse bots and Varangians, to try what works out and see what sticks. This is actually a pretty good approach to learning a faction, even if, for example, I would tell you, hey, I like 2 serious troopers. I think they add a defensive presence in O-12 that's really nice. I like 2 gammas if you can afford it, because they are big and chonky, and it turns out I have a type. But for real, 2 gammas, fantastic units, one would do heavy lifting in this game. But when you are learning a faction, you don't want to go all in on pieces like that, you want to see what works. So this is good. Some notable pieces that I particularly like: the Lynx Plasma Carbine Specialist Operative is a personal favorite of mine. The Gamma Trooper, as I mentioned, is an exceptional piece, and I like how my opponent here has included the Beta Trooper. It is okay in this scenario in supplies, but he has been playing against Toha recently, and he's really sick of Ferroware. So the Beta Trooper is going into lists as an answer to getting endgamed and erasered through walls. He also has an Alpha, which is really one of the best for cost lieutenants in the game, combining +1 command token, which is okay but still nice, with Strategos, with counterintelligence, and a hard-to-kill piece. The Alpha is up there next to probably exceeding Veronin, and certainly for cost exceeding Saladin, and is a fantastic lieutenant piece. He's rolling Whip 14, I'm rolling Whip 16, and this time I would win the roll to go first. And I choose to go first here when I say win the roll to go first, because I am playing against O-12, a faction who has access to counterintelligence and Andromeda in the same list. Now, I can't know that my opponent has those, but I'm not willing to take the risk, so even if supplies is a scenario where first or second can both be kind of okay, I elect to go first. This is the table post-deployment. Now, there are a few interesting things that I'm going to mention here, but one of the big learning points that I'm picking up as I play Haqqislam throughout the campaign is the psychological effect of the phrase, all of my bikers deploy impetuous. It causes changes in how your opponent deploys, even if without the impetuous order, the bikers could still make significant, fast, dangerous warband attacks. The act of telling your opponent that produces certain outcomes, which I find is interesting. In terms of our deployment, Saladin is hanging out back here with the Bereed. We've got 2 regular bikers there and the 3rd one there. Zalekia is nooked back here, and she's not impetuous. The 2nd Bereed is over here. The guided missile remote is watching my backline. There's the Ghulam hacker hanging out down here. And then pretty much all of my force is concentrated in the center. So the Mukhtar and Asawira duo are hanging out there and there, and the Shakoosh has reserve dropped down where you can see it in the middle of the field there. The Libertos is just in a screening role in the midfield, and the Hassassin Fidei as the reserve drop has come down here outside the enemy deployment zone because there's a gangbuster there that I can start in the back arc of. My opponent's deployment zone is a little bit cut off in this photo, but notable pieces is that a Gamma will reserve drop behind this crate here with a nice-ish long lane down this road. The Warcore is just in an ablative position there. A Crusher is going to end up reserve dropping standing on this rooftop here. And there is a Kappa Sniper up on the tallest of these crates watching basically all of this space. Now, That's quite a lot of hard ARO presence. There's also some standing flash pulse bots. And that hard ARO presence has been kind of baited out because of these motorcycles. I think the Crusher especially is going to end up kind of being a mistake to deploy standing. Yes, it has a light rocket launcher, but between it and the sniper and the flash pulse bots and the Warcore is disposable, and the Gangbuster, which is also deployed standing and will end up going into suppressive fire, that is a lot of hard AROs that I can just roll up and engage with the BS-14 tag. And that's basically what's going to happen. My impetuous moves are broadly pinned back. There's just about space for this biker to risk it and move forward to there, but it can't really land smoke. It's not stopped by anything. I effectively don't have an impetuous phase. Most of what I do have is heavy presence in the center, plus the skirmishers move up and do work. This is going to be a fairly significant first turn alpha strike, and it's made significant because of how my opponent has defended. So, for example, the decision to put the Gangbuster into suppressive fire is immediately foiled by the fact that the Fidei drops out of impersonation by declaring Discover, which triggers the Mad Trap. I've misjudged that. He dodges, I dodge, I succeed my dodge, suppressive fire is broken, and effectively what he's done there is he's cost me kind of at most sort of one order, and by comparison, he'd have cost me 2 if he'd stripped orders from my first combat group. So the Libertos is going to move up here, and the Fidei, between the two of them, they will pincer the Gangbuster. Frankly, I could probably have just done this with the Libertos, but I didn't. It's fine. The Gangbuster will go down in maybe a couple too many orders, but that's where the inefficiency of my first turn stops. The rest of the turn is very aggressive. The Shakush, it only has an AP Spitfire in this list because I felt like I needed access to armor-piercing rounds. It would have been better off to have a heavy machine gun for at least the first turn, but is better off with an AP Spitfire from the second turn onwards. Don't really have a thought yet on what is best. But the Shakush comes up here, engages and kills the War Correspondent at bad range for both, pops into this building, engages and kills the Sniper, taking a face-to-face roll from out of cover. Like, it's messy and awkward as I move up towards these crates, but I have 3 wounds and armor 6. He's rolling 1 dice, he flubs his roll needing 15s, I land an 11, I land a hit on like an 8, a crit at bad range in cover. Like, it's a hot mess. I come up to this window here to see the Crusher, and I delete it in 1 order as well. So in the space of a few orders, the Crusher has, the Shakush has eliminated, in frankly not necessarily the best face-to-face rolls, but it's eliminated every piece that threatened to constrain my advance, and that has freed up the Mukta and the Asawira to go on an absolute tear. Now, the two of them don't actually need to score that many kills, but they can move up and around through here, and then they can do the thing that I like pieces like this to do in supplies, which is that the Doctor can pick up the crate here, pick up the supply box, and then they begin moving this direction. And as part of that movement, the Mukhtar will take over the team leadership and pick up the box from the Asawira Doctor, which means that when I get around to here, the Asawira Doctor is no longer holding a crate and can pick up this supply box. We pause very briefly to delete a flash pulse bot using the Mukhtar's MSV2 Red Fury, and then they basically pop down here and they hide in this position there and there. There's some movement with the rest of my second combat group, but functionally this is my first turn. I've killed a whole bunch of my opponent's pieces. I'm not really in a great deal of danger, and I've secured two objectives. Here you can see a shot. One of the bikers has moved up to protect the flank. I'm a bit concerned about airborne deployment pieces. And we've got the Mukhtar and the Asawira just hanging out, holding two objectives in a position that would be very hard for my opponent to attack. And even if they do successfully attack, I should be able to recover those elements there. Now, at this point, my opponent begins what will be their only turn of the game. They feel like they basically need things to go exactly right this turn, and I agree. What actually happens is this. So a Varangian guard storms into this room. It's deployed here, and it can impetuous move into close combat with the prone Fidei, who I did not have enough orders to re-impersonate. That's well and good, except that the Fidei just makes a CC attack, and the Varangian guard can't berserk because it didn't have line of fire, so the Varangian chain templates me, I pass my save, and the DACCW of the Fidei kills the Varangian all the way to dead. With that threat still at his back, my opponent moves the Gamma up and out, and the Gamma moves up to engage the Hassassin Fidei. And it takes 4 consecutive orders to actually kill, firing that pistol at point-blank range. He's winning face-to-face rolls on 17s versus my smoke dodge on 15s, but he's usually only landing about 1 hit per roll, and I roll 17, 18, 19, 20 for my armor rolls. The Fide just lives and lives and lives. What that means is that even though the Gamma successfully kills the Fide eventually and kills the Libertos, again, shock-heavy pistol. By the way, one of the reasons I love the Gamma as a piece is that it has BS attack +1 burst, which means that it can transition from long range to close range assault really easily and make use of that 6-2 move. And then it moves up to engage the Shakoosh with its flare back, but it's engaging the Shakoosh inside 16 inches. Although it's burst 3, it needs 11s, I need 14s, and I just kind of win face-to-face rolls. He can't progress any further, he gets stuck in this building, and I begin my turn and I tee off on him. This is a shot of the Shakoosh moving up and around to C, and a volley of gunfire later, and the Gamma survives, takes no damage, actually wounds the Shakoosh, but then he misses his shot completely, 4 rounds get through, and I think the Gamma goes to either 1 wound or completely dead. And at that point, basically, we call the game. This picture is kind of a hypothetical of what he needed to try to accomplish, which is to push the Gamma far enough forward into a position where he could potentially engage these pieces. Now, I'm not actually sure he can easily see all of them, particularly the Mukhtar should be safe, and the Asawira is fairly good at surviving this engagement, at least for a time. It can be shooting 1 dice on 17s versus... in that position, it would be 3 dice on 17s till I guts into cover, assuming I pass my religious check. But he just never made it there. He never made it there. Then the Gamma went down, and that was pretty much the game. Quick F in chat for this meme that was produced after the fact. Now, in the interest of producing something a little bit interesting or a takeaway here, I am going to just talk about how I think he should have defended and some small changes that he might have made that could have affected the outcome of the game, noting that the counter-assault that he made was just thoroughly stymied by dice. He needed the counter-assault to be successful, to be very successful actually, because he was in a bad position. So let's talk about how that position could maybe have been slightly less bad. If we just reevaluate the deployment zone, here are some changes that I think he should make. Firstly, the Crusher should not have been standing, or the Kappa Sniper up here shouldn't have been standing. I don't mind one of the two being on ARO duty, and I think I prefer it being the Sniper, because what he's specifically trying to do here is stop me from declaring impetuous orders with my bikes. The Sniper alone, or the Kappa alone, the Crusher alone would have accomplished that. Although if the Sniper had been, say, a guided missile remote, which is almost exactly the same cost, that would have been even more effective. This biker here, for example, I took the risk of moving it out on the grounds that I thought it wouldn't be in line of fire of the Sniper, but I would have been totally unwilling to risk that with a missile because the impact template could have hit something other than the biker. So all he needed was 1 troop here to dissuade me from taking impetuous orders. By putting up 2 troops, he exposed a lot of points to harm. Secondly, some flash pulse remotes, one of which died quite trivially to a Mukhtar, were placed on ARO. Deploying flash pulse remotes as ARO pieces is something you want to be really careful about, because they're only 7 points and they're kind of hard to kill, but they're also your order base in many cases. One of the most important things to my mind when deploying picket, like flash pulse bots as picket elements, is if you have the opportunity to do so, don't think about putting them in their good range. Think about putting your opponent in their bad range. Flash pulse bots have got a very forgiving -3 range band, and my whole list was 24-inch range guns. If he deployed a long way back, so for example, let's say there was a flash pulse bot behind this building here, I could still have engaged it with long range pieces, but the possibility of me getting into a 24-inch range firefight would have been diminished. Now, yes, that means that the flash pulse bot is at -3 from range, -3 from cover, but so are my pieces, and I'm rolling more dice, I'm more affected by that negative malice. All you want from a flash pulse bot is for it to not die and soak up my orders in the active turn. It's not actually looking to succeed to stun me, it's looking to waste my orders. So you put flash pulse bots, if you're going to deploy them as hard ARO elements, put them back as far as possible. The alternative use, and which one of the flash pulse bots was put to, is what I would call a picket remote, where really it's just kind of watching your deployment zones, and that's fine. The second thing that I would really change is how the Gangbuster was handled, and I think this alone might have significantly affected the game outcome. In this case, I'm playing a Whip 16 lieutenant with 2 reserve drops in Haqqislam, and you haven't seen a ton of points. You should assume the presence of at least 1 Fidei, and you should react accordingly. Deploying the Alpha as one of his 2 reserves, not deploying the Alpha rather as one of his 2 reserves, was a risk. I ultimately didn't go for it because it's a one-way ticket for a Fidei, but that's something that you could have considered as reserve dropping the Alpha. But the Gangbuster should definitely have been a reserve drop. There are 2 reasons why. The first one is that the Gangbuster is a non-marker state infiltrating piece, which means that it's very vulnerable to being counter-deployed by, for example, a Fidei, or if I'd had a Libertos in reserve. Secondly, the Gangbuster is a really good counter-element for a Hassassin Fidei because it deploys alongside its Mad Trap. So you can use the Gangbuster to pinch the Fidei in and keep it from moving and pin it down, whereas because it wasn't deployed as the reserve, I could just deploy my Fidei in its back arc, and I shot it, and the Libertos helped, but in any case, if the Gangbuster is a reserve drop, then you can position it so that it is safe and being dangerous and using the Mad Trap most effectively. I think the Gamma was deployed reasonably well, but if I had to pick 2 reserves, I'd probably have gone with, yes, the Gamma, and then secondly, the Gangbuster, and the Gangbuster would have been most relevant in terms of holding things back. Now, what we didn't speak about but was relevant is that the Lynx operative was hanging out back here, looking for short-range arrows in this space. I quite like that. That's protection against a run by this biker up towards the Alpha unit, and that's totally okay. It would never do anything all game, although we did hypothetically roll some dice, and it would go on to kill the Shakoosh hanging out up here. Crit with a plasma carbine at good range is going to really mess up even a light tag in particular, and it would seize this box, but that's about all that it would accomplish. It would end up being the unsung hero of the alternate timeline where we played this game out. That's what it would accomplish, but enough damage had been done over the course of my first turn and my reactive turn that we didn't actually reach that point, although I've given those points to O-12 regardless. So just thinking about how the game might have gone if some things had been different, if this Crusher had been prone, the Gamma would have had 1 more order on its first turn to prosecute this attack. If this Flash Pulse bot had been hanging further out back, that would have been another potential +1 order that the Gamma could have had to move up to here. As well as, obviously, the Crusher being an active turn threat against these elements. Maybe I would have been forced to pull them back into a different position, or be maybe back into this building here to be safe from the threat of the light rocket launcher. That would have made the Gamma's attack run easier because it wouldn't have to have covered as much distance. So basically the series of terrible dice failures that my opponent ran into on his first turn could have been mitigated if a bit more of his force had been intact, and I think a bit more of his force could have been intact without actually changing any of the luck that occurred on my first active turn. If the Gangbuster had been the reserve, I also couldn't have deployed the Fidei where I did, although it's pretty likely that it would have ended up being a Gangbuster versus Fidei fight in any case. It just would have been one that was more favourable for the Gangbuster. So, I hope you've enjoyed this. We're clocking in at about 18 minutes. I'll conclude the battle report here, and I hope to have a Panic Room game coming up soon to continue Durgama Takeover Week 2.